Hey friends, welcome back to Fantasy Awash. Today we are going to be talking about First Law. I am super excited. I am back in this universe and we're going to be talking about the three standalones today, which are Best Served Cold, The Heroes, and Red Country. Let's jump in. If you're new here, you might not know that I love Joe Abercrombie so very much. I think that in terms of our modern fantasy authors, he's pretty much the best one out there in terms of doing character work, inner monologues, and just bringing a story to life through their characters. The plot as a whole, also great, but he really does shine in his character work. I loved his original trilogy, which is called the First Law trilogy, and was super excited to jump into the three standalones that bridge the series between his second trilogy that takes place in this world, the Age of Madness trilogy. Now, the order in which you are supposed to read these books is Best Served Cold, The Heroes, and Red Country. Joe himself has come out and said he doesn't really care which order that you read the books, but I chose to read them in this way based on the recommendation of many people that I know that have read them. I am happy that I ended up doing this because the characters that ebb and flow throughout these books, it makes sense to read them in this order. So I'm going to give a little bit of a summary for each book, a little bit of a breakdown, and then discuss my overall feelings about the standalones in comparison to the first trilogy. So our first book is Best Served Cold. This is a revenge story if ever there was one. Monza is technically the main POV of this book. However, the second POV, who I think is much more interesting, is Shivers. Shivers is from the north. He has gone to start a new life in this place called Styria that we've heard about in the first trilogy, but we haven't seen, and he encounters Monza. Monza is out for revenge on anybody that has crossed her and has been in connection with the death of her brother. This is probably my least favorite of the three standalones just because I found the plot to be a little bit derivative. I got that it was a revenge story, but simultaneously I wanted a little bit more, especially from Monza, because in terms of his female characters in the first trilogy, I found that they felt a little bit flat and Monza wasn't really an exception to that rule. However, the story itself was quite fun, and if you are someone that likes revenge stories and you like a found family type trope or band of misfits, then this is probably going to be a really good read for you, because along the way they build a team around them, and that team is incredibly humorous. I'm not going to name the characters because I don't want to give away spoilers, because some of the people are characters that have been mentioned in previous books, and it really is fun when you go into these books blind and you realize, oh yeah, I do know that person, and you can refamiliarize yourself with them, their quirks, their, what makes them tick, and just really immerse yourself in the story at that time. Overall, for me, the story Best Served Cold, I enjoyed it. I found that it was a bit of a letdown if you were to jump into it immediately after The Last Argument of Kings, which is the final book of the First Law trilogy. But as a whole, an enjoyable story. I do think that it is generally agreed upon that this tends to be the bottom book, or if not, one of the other ones that I'm going to talk about, but we'll get to that in a minute. Book 2 is the best of the bunch, and I friggin' love this book. The Heroes is a phenomenal case of storytelling and character work. It takes place over 72 hours. It is just 3 days. 3 days. And yet we are so immersed in the story that Joe likes to tell us. The story is that we have warriors that are going to battle in England. It is our Northmen versus the, people from Adua, and everything that has been the fallout from our story at the end of Last Argument of Kings. This is something that I felt that Joe Abercrombie did beautifully. Everything seamlessly worked together so well, and the POVs for this book were astounding. Bremerdan Gorst is arguably the best character, in my opinion, in addition to Glocta. Sandan Glocta from our first trilogy and Bremerdan Gorst in the standalones. No one compares. I think that he is hysterically funny in terms of inner monologue, dialogue, the dichotomy of how his voice is portrayed to the outside world versus how he hears himself was masterful, especially if you listen to the audiobooks and you understand as to how beautifully Stephen Pacey delivers this. This is something, again, that I want to articulate. While these books are beautiful to read, please listen to the audiobooks because Stephen Pacey is the best audiobook narrator. I will die on that hill. And the way that he brings First Law to life is unparalleled, and he just has this uncanny ability to make you know instantly who is speaking. Everyone has a distinctive voice, tone, flavor. I love the way that he did this for the heroes. It really is a marriage, I feel like, between Pacey and Abercrombie to bring these stories to their full potential, because while I think the books themselves are pretty great, Stephen Pacey just nudges them up that extra little bit, and I love him for it. In terms of the overall plot, we have all these different Northmen that are kind of battling it out. In addition, we have the people from Adua, like Brummerdam Gorse, that are there to assert the king's presence in the north, and it's really chaotic. It is about 10 years, I believe, after the events of Last Argument of Kings, and about 7 years after the events of Best Served Cold. So in terms of reading the books chronologically, this is a good case for that, because there are characters from Best Served Cold that do resurface in the heroes, and I think that it was good to read it in that order. In terms of enjoyment level for this book, 5 stars. It was my first 5-star read, I think, of the year. That wasn't a reread, and I just was laughing out loud so frequently when I read this. You get to experience characters from the first trilogy, but in a new way. You get to know characters on a much deeper level, and the way that the world just continues to expand, even though it's in a region that you've already become familiar with, aka England. I thought England in this book was so much more interesting than any of the previous books. So I love that he was able to do that. Love the heroes, highly recommend it. Final book of the trilogies is Red Country, and I struggled with Red Country solely because it is in a Western setting. I don't like Westerns. I just don't. I know that a lot of people really do, and it seems that that has been a trend that has kind of been surfacing on BookTube, at least in our corner of BookTube for the last year or so, is that people are really starting to get more into these Western settings. I'm happy for you. I don't like it. And I found that Red Country was a better written book than Best Served Cold, but in terms of overall plot and characters, I didn't find it as compelling or as interesting. I really wanted to love this book because some of the moments in this book had me cackling. There were a few instances where I had to pause the book because I was listening and could not stop laughing because it was just that good and I was that engrossed with the story. Whereas I found that the heroes was constantly just kept going up and getting better and better and better. Red Country did a lot of dips. And I found that there were quite a few lulls in the story that probably could have been taken out. It could have been a shorter book than it already was. And I just feel like in terms of the 6 books in this universe that I've read, it was the one that I was definitely the least invested in and least interested in, even though I don't think that it was the worst written book. All in all, in terms of how I feel about why the standalones were written, I get it. If you look at the standalones as a whole, as the journey of one particular character, it makes sense. But I don't feel like I necessarily needed these stories to be fully fleshed out in the way that they have been. The heroes, I think, definitely. I would not have wanted it any other way. Give me a full book. Give me that book. It's perfect. In terms of Best Served Cold and Red Country, I get why they are there. They serve their purpose and their function. But in terms of if I feel I'll reread them again, probably not. I will definitely reread the heroes, and I have since started Sharp Ends, which is the book of short stories. And again, I'm kind of feeling like Sharp Ends isn't necessarily something that I feel like I need. I'm happy to have it because I think that some of the stories are great, and there's 2 new characters in this that I think are excellent. But I don't know if these books were absolutely necessary. I enjoyed them and definitely encourage you to go read them. My opinion might not be your opinion on them, and I hope that if you do read them, and I do want you to read them, that you end up liking them maybe more than I did. But I am curious as to what the general consensus amongst Abercrombie's readership is as to whether or not we actually needed these books, because he's such an evocative storyteller and his characters are so good that I wonder if sometimes we forget a little bit about the overall plot just because we love the characters so much. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts were about the standalones in the First Law universe. If you've read them, if you want to read them, what order you read them in and what order you rank them in. I'm curious as to who your favorite characters were, if you found that the characters were compelling. The characters for me in Red Country weren't the most compelling. Probably could have done without a couple of them, so I'm curious what other people think. Let me know what you're reading now. I am excited to jump into The Age of Madness, which I am hoping to start probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm waiting for it to come in on my app, and I will keep you guys updated. In the meantime, if you're new here, welcome. Thanks for spending your time with me. If you want to help out the channel, you can always hit like and subscribe. All the information is down below if you want to follow me on Instagram, Goodreads, all that fun stuff. I like to post videos fairly regularly. I have been a little bit more MIA recently just because I have been writing full-time and editing full-time, which is exhausting. I've come to learn that I absolutely loathe editing, but it is a necessary evil. Thank you again for spending your time with me, and as always, I'll see you next time.